What if a single moment in history completely rewrote the story of Islam as we know it today? The year was 680, and a small band of just 72 men faced an army of thousands in the scorching desert of Karbala. The defeat of Imam al-Husayn that day split Islam forever and shaped 1400 years of history. Imagine if that fateful day had ended differently. What if those promised reinforcements from Kufa had actually arrived? What if, instead of martyrdom, Husayn had achieved victory? Picture how differently events might have unfolded. The entire religious landscape of our modern world might look unrecognizably different, a transformation stemming from just one pivotal battle in the desert sand. The promised reinforcements arrive. Picture this: the plains of Karbala, the scorching sun bearing down on Husayn's small band of followers. They're outnumbered, surrounded, and cut off from water. Death seems certain. But then, a cloud of dust appears on the horizon. Not the reinforcements Yazid sent to crush them, but thousands of Kufan warriors racing to fulfill their promise to the grandson of the Prophet. This is where our alternate history begins. Historical sources tell us that tens of thousands had initially pledged allegiance to Husayn. These were members of prominent tribal affiliations throughout the Kufa region, experienced warriors skilled in the combat tactics of 7th century Arabia, swordsmen, spearmen, and archers who knew the desert terrain intimately. So what happened? Why did these thousands abandon Husayn in the actual timeline? The answer lies in Ibn Ziyad, the Umayyad governor dispatched to Kufa. When Husayn sent his cousin Muslim ibn Aqil ahead, things initially looked promising. Muslim gathered substantial support, with Kufans lining up to declare their loyalty to Husayn. This success triggered Ibn Ziyad's response. Ibn Ziyad systematically dismantled the entire support network through intimidation, arrests, and public executions, creating such pervasive fear that the promised Kufan reinforcements never materialized. But in our alternate timeline, what if these tactics had failed? What if enough Kufans slipped through Ibn Ziyad's dragnet and made it to Karbala? Among Husayn's dehydrated followers, the distant dust cloud would transform from dread to elation, a rising tide of hope washing over their parched souls. The battlefield dynamics would transform overnight. With thousands of Kufan warriors arriving, the Umayyad forces under Umar ibn Sa'ad would suddenly find themselves vulnerable. These forces could execute a classic pincer movement, Kufan cavalry sweeping from the east while their infantry attacked the western flank, with Husayn's forces engaging from their position. The Umayyads, suddenly outnumbered, would lose their greatest advantage. The Kufans would bring crucial tactical advantages. They could seize control of the Euphrates water sources that the Umayyads had blocked, relieving fighters who had gone days without proper hydration. Their knowledge of local terrain would disrupt Umayyad supply lines, forcing Umar ibn Sa'ad to either retreat or face defeat. The psychological impact on the Umayyad ranks would be devastating. Many soldiers in Umar's army were already reluctant participants. Seeing the tide turn, defections would likely follow. Even in the actual battle, figures like Hur switched sides despite the certainty of death. The immediate aftermath of this victory would be critical. Yazid, in Damascus, would face a serious challenge to his authority. By the time he could respond, news of Husayn's victory would spread throughout the Islamic world. Other regions, already resenting Umayyad rule, might rise in support of the Prophet's grandson. A military victory at Karbala would position Husayn as a legitimate alternative ruler to Yazid, with his lineage's moral authority and the military backing to reinforce his claim. The alternate Islamic governance. The battlefield at Karbala would have been just the beginning of Husayn's revolution. His victory would have represented something far more profound than a simple military triumph. It would have offered a radical alternative to the political structure that was rapidly forming under Umayyad rule. The economic and administrative systems Husayn proposed would have dramatically differed from Yazid's model, creating what some historians consider a road not taken for Islamic civilization. Husayn's vision for governance embodied a complete reimagining of Islamic leadership. At its core was a commitment to social justice and equitable resource distribution that directly challenged the growing autocracy of the Umayyads. While Yazid transformed the caliphate into a hereditary monarchy favoring his clan, Husayn advocated for a return to the consultative principles of early Islamic governance, a renaissance of moral leadership emerging from the ashes of despotism. Had he emerged victorious, Husayn's path would have unfolded in clear stages. First, consolidating power in Kufa where his support base was strongest, then potentially marching on Damascus. This would have created two competing Islamic authorities, one in Syria under Yazid, another in Iraq under Husayn. The reaction from other power centers would have followed a predictable sequence. Medina and Mecca, already chafing under Umayyad control, would have aligned with Husayn. Egypt, with its large population of early converts marginalized by Umayyad policies, might have recognized the Prophet's grandson as legitimate. Within months, the Islamic world could have developed competing centers of authority. Husayn's governance model would have mirrored his father Ali's brief but significant caliphate. When Ali served as caliph, he implemented a treasury system where officials received no more than ordinary citizens. "The strong among you shall be weak until I have secured the rights of the weak," Ali famously declared, personally carrying food to the homes of the poor and implementing strict accountability measures for government officials. This stood in stark contrast to the lavish Umayyad court. Ali's radical egalitarianism directly contradicted the Umayyad practice of favoring certain tribes. Husayn's continuation of these policies would have provided a genuine alternative to the aristocratic structures forming under Umayyad rule. The tax system would have seen particular reforms. Under the Umayyads, taxation had become a tool for enriching the ruling elite, with governors manipulating collection for personal gain. Husayn would have returned to a more equitable system benefiting the entire community. Husayn's survival would have preserved a direct connection to the Prophet's teachings at the highest levels of governance. Islamic jurisprudence might have developed along entirely different lines, with the Prophet's immediate family maintaining continuous influence over interpretation of Islamic principles. Practical challenges would have been enormous. Tribal politics would have required careful navigation, and the Umayyads would not have surrendered power easily. Husayn would have needed to balance idealistic principles with pragmatic governance, maintaining the revolutionary social equality of early Islam rather than accommodating pre-Islamic power structures. The unbroken Islamic identity. While Husayn's governance model would have dramatically reshaped Islamic political structures, there's an even more profound consequence that would be visible to us today: the absence of history's most significant religious schism. That road not taken would have fundamentally altered the spiritual identity of millions of Muslims across the centuries. The Battle of Karbala transformed from a military conflict into the singular event that crystallized Shia Islam as a distinct religious consciousness. The martyrdom of Imam Husayn on the 10th of Muharram in 680 created a clear boundary between those who would become Shia Muslims and the broader Muslim community. It formed the foundation for a separate religious identity built around sacrifice, martyrdom, and the resistance of tyranny. A triumphant Husayn presents a profound paradox. The very movement that venerates him might never have existed in recognizable form. Without his martyrdom, the sharp distinction between what we now call Sunni and Shia might have remained a minor political difference rather than a theological division. Where the barren plains of Karbala became watered with the blood of martyrs, in our alternate timeline they might have flourished as the birthplace of a unified Islamic governance. The emotional landscape would be utterly transformed. The powerful Ashura commemorations, where millions gather annually to reenact Karbala through processions and passion plays, simply wouldn't exist. The rhythmic chest beating, the communal weeping, the black-clad mourners moving through the streets from Karachi to Karbala itself, these profound expressions of community sorrow would never have developed. Instead of retreating into periods of hiding and political exclusion, the Prophet's descendants might have continued as visible leaders with unbroken succession. The parched desert of political exclusion that drove Shia theology underground could instead have blossomed into a garden of direct prophetic authority. The complex systems of clerical interpretation that developed during the occultation of later Imams might never have changed, creating a more direct connection to religious leadership that bridged potential sectarian divides. The narrative of Islamic history would read entirely differently. Rather than chronicling tragedies befalling the Prophet's family, historical accounts might have recorded their successful leadership and continuation of his mission. The persecution of al-Bayt would not form the emotional core of a distinct Islamic identity, potentially allowing for a more unified historic memory among all Muslims. Would a more unified Islam have been more resilient against external threats, more effective in its expansion, more consistent in its legal development? These questions cannot be answered with certainty, but the absence of major sectarian divisions would have undoubtedly changed Islam's historical trajectory, potentially strengthening its institutions against both internal conflicts and external pressures. Conclusion. Throughout history, we've seen how seemingly minor events can alter entire civilizations. And nowhere is this paradox more evident than at Karbala. What appears as Husayn's defeat on the battlefield transformed into something far more profound, a spiritual victory unprecedented in revolutionary history. By sacrificing his life, Husayn ensured Islam's core tenets survived when most threatened by Umayyad distortion. His martyrdom became a timeless symbol of resistance, inspiring countless generations across centuries. Like a beacon that outshines darkness, Karbala established the al-Bayt as exemplars of truth and justice. Their influence extends beyond what political power could have achieved. In death, Husayn found immortality. If you have found something valuable in this exploration of alternate history, please subscribe to Alt History Zone to become a valued member of the Alt History Zone family. Remember that those who do not know history are bound to repeat it. Stay tuned.